Welcome everybody. And people are still continuing to join. So hello to everyone as you do join. So as I say, we do have a lot to cover today, but I do want to just begin by acknowledging the violent and terrible events that have been happening across our country this week. One of the main reasons that I became a librarian, and I'm sure many of you, is because of the core values that are held so closely by our profession: free expression and tolerance, respect, civility and civic engagement, education, literacy, enlightenment, many others. And as librarians and library workers and supporters, we are regularly engaged in work that brings people together and brings communities together. And we have always been a force for good, I think, and we must be a force for good now as we work together with our communities. I know we're all trying to do what's right and what's best for our local libraries, and I want to say that I am so thankful for our community of library directors and leaders. And we just need to continue to do the best we can to bring people together. And, we're all in it together. So thank you all for being out there and being here. And, hopefully we will be able to do continue to do the good and important work for everyone that needs to be done. So, let us turn now to that important work so that we can, be the kind of libraries that we need to be for our communities. As I said, we do have a lot to cover today. We have a lot of people on this call. We're up to 603 now. So we need to manage the time very carefully, and that's one of my main tasks. And I know that you are all very experienced Zoom users at this point. So just be aware that it is a very full agenda, and yes, there is an agenda that is in L2. Thank you, Monica. So you can find it on the chat page. Anyway, as I said, we do have to be very mindful of the time, and that's mainly my job, but I appreciate everybody's efforts to keep us, moving forward expeditiously, but still being sure that we don't leave anything or anybody out. So with that, I'm going to dive in. Just some general news, just really quickly. Our census grant, yes, work is continuing on the census. This is one of those important, pieces of work that we've been doing with our member libraries. Our subrecipients, Amy De La Fuente has been doing a great job leading the project, and as a show of support for all the work that libraries have been doing, we were just awarded an additional $352,000 for July through October work to be done. So we don't have time to go into the details of that today, but we do want to, shine a light on that in the near future through a CE event or a networking event, because we are being asked by IDHS to reach out beyond our subrecipients to really focus on the areas of our system service area, and even just in Illinois in general, where there is not a high response rate. So more time, devoted to that later. Also do want to remind you about our COVID page on our website. There's a lot of great resources there. Please check that out. And also that we've been doing these Rails Minute videos once a week, and they really are about a minute. Thanks to Dan for thinking of that and helping me with that. So there, we share those on social media, and that's just another way to find out what's going on with Rails. And then just to update you on, very mundane, normal life kinds of things. Our budget, the budget that the General Assembly passed, is level funded. I'm not sure that the governor has signed it yet. This budget was for all, all the library lines were included in those lines, and it also includes the per capita increases that the Secretary of State put into his budget. Per capita increases for public libraries and school libraries, first increases in 25 years. So, it remains to be seen whether the revenue will be there to support these budgets, but it's certainly, a vote of confidence and in libraries. And just so you all know, we're taking a very conservative approach at this point. We have no way of knowing what the revenue picture is going to look like any more than anybody else does. We're going to be really conservative as far as expenditures go until we do have a clearer picture of what the state revenue will be like. Plus, as always, there's a cash flow issue. As you all know, I think our payments are always delayed. That's enough of the general news. Unless anybody has a specific question about any of that right now. If you don't, I'm going to turn it over to Monica and Mark.
Thank you, Dee.
The projected increase, it's a 21% increase. Sorry, Monica.
That's okay.
And Joe is here from the State Library, so he can always chime in on that as well. But that is my understanding. That was the increase. Okay.
So today we are coming to talk to you a little bit about our new delivery plan. And as all of you are no doubt aware, Rails had suspended delivery since mid-March in response to the pandemic. At Rails, we have committed to be ready to return to delivery when our libraries are ready. And so in May, we launched a survey of our member libraries about their interest in a return to physical delivery. And that survey closed on May 21st. 456 libraries responded to the survey. Of those, 67% of those responding were public libraries, with an additional 15% academic, 11% school, and 5% special. In addition to all of the aggregate pieces that we got of information, we got a lot of individual comments, which are very helpful in coming together and developing our plan. So of those surveyed, 44% of libraries surveyed said they would be ready to receive regular delivery in June. Another 39% of those surveyed noted that they were tying those plans to the phasing of the governor's plan. And so while they were unsure about the exact timing, they would be ready when the appropriate phase of the governor's plan, according to their own plan, moved forward. Given that the majority of libraries expressed an interest in seeing delivery resume within the month, Rails did develop a plan that would allow that process to return as soon as possible on a library by library opt-in basis. Rails announced our new delivery plan on this Tuesday, June 4th, for the first phase of delivery to resume beginning June 18th. That plan is available through the Pulse page, and I know that there was a link that was noted in the chat here, so if you haven't seen that, go ahead and take a look. But included is a checklist that explains the steps a library needs to take in order to resume delivery. You are also welcome to email the delivery help desk at any time with specific questions or requests that you might have. We'll also be recording all questions asked in the chat today, so even if we aren't able to answer your question today as part of the webinar, we will address the questions and publish responses as we can. And with that, I will introduce Mark Hatch, our Rails Delivery and Facilities Director, who will explain the plan in more detail. Mark?
Hi, thanks, Monica. I'm just going to briefly go over the plan that's going to take effect this month. On June the 15th, our delivery drivers and sorters will report back to the office. We've got about 43,000 items that the goal is to get those returned back to the owning library as soon as possible. We're looking at, as Monica said, doing the first wave of the deliveries June the 17th. We would go out and deliver what we've got, retrieve any material that is currently within the libraries that is labeled and ready to go. Then the second wave would actually be on June the 25th, which would be the second wave where we would deliver the material that we picked up on the 18th. There was a question within the chat about labels. You may not have enough labels. I've attached the link to where you can definitely get additional labels, and we can send out as many as possible that you're going to need to make sure that you have plenty on hand. One of the things that that I definitely want to talk about is we're not going to be able to hit a lot of the academics and schools at this point because that's going to take a lot more detailed coordination. So we will eventually address that at a later date, but right now we will hit all of the specials and the publics at this time. So one other thing to just briefly mention that if you are in need of containers or supplies like that, to definitely utilize the delivery help desk ticketing system that still is open and available. We did not turn that off. That is still available for libraries to still use. Once we go out on the 18th, one of the things that we put in the opening plans is to, if we did not have key and alarm code access to your location, we would definitely need someone to be on site for us to gain access. So we'll do our best to try and get there within the normal times, but the one thing that I have to say is providing accurate arrival times is going to be extremely difficult at this stage. So we'll do the best we can to get there as soon as possible. If your location is serviced by CTL, our delivery delivery vendor, you won't have to change a thing, and you won't have to worry about a thing. Your delivery would take place in the PM after hours as it normally has in the past. So you don't have to concern yourself if you're currently serviced by CTL. One of the things that we're going to do, we would like to start the regular delivery on actually June the 29th, where we start making regular deliveries, as Monica said, as you opt in to receive the service. So we're asking that libraries start to notify us through our ticketing system so that it can be routed to the appropriate service center manager for him to actually put you on a schedule. Once again, once that starts on June the 29th, it's going to be awfully difficult to predict arrival times. So be patient with us and understand that those times are going to change consistently. As members continue to opt in, those would definitely continue to change. Another area that we addressed in the letter is also providing a contact list area for the containers to be placed in, where you could leave your outgoing containers, and then we would actually leave our incoming containers in that particular area. You know, that's primarily just to safeguard our drivers and then also your staff to make sure that there's no issues there. I also want to reiterate is please do not quarantine items within the blue containers. I don't have enough blue containers to go around if everyone started quarantining items for 7 days at a time. So I would run out of containers within the first week. So we're asking you to still address this the same way you would do a book drop. Just remove those items, put them into your quarantine areas, and then utilize those containers for the in-transit items. Let's see, what else should I actually speak about relatively quickly? No time is precious here. So I think that's primarily about it. That I'll stop there, and I'm not sure if there's any questions that have come through the chat.
There's a lot of questions.
We have
There's a
tons
lot
of
of questions.
questions.
Tons of questions. So
I can maybe just go through some of them. Again, we're not going to be able to answer all of these. I've tried to keep up with some of them in chat, but you've already gotten beyond me. So first of all, can people get an estimate on how many items they're going to get on the 18th and 25th mark?
No. Not at this point, what I've got is 43,000 items, that belongs to, all of our members. That the goal right now is I don't have a breakdown by location of what I'm actually going to be delivering. I'm hoping that I'm not sure exactly what to drop off. I'm not sure how to answer that, I guess I should say.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how to answer that. I don't know how to provide them with that type of information.
Okay.
Well, it might, I mean, some of this is us, like, collecting questions that you have to figure out if there is a way that we can respond to your needs. Okay. So, I mean, we have to sort these things, obviously, before we deliver them. So it might be possible that we could give you a general idea. But we don't have that figured out right now. But we'll put that on the list of things to see if we can figure out, and we'll let you know.
Could you describe what you mean by contactless delivery, Mark?
Sure. Contactless delivery is just primarily where we're not going behind the circulation desks and speaking with people and things of that nature. We can definitely say hi. But as far as going behind circulation desks and things like that, we're hoping that there could be a designated area away from the other staff members where we could just utilize to drop off and retrieve containers from. So we don't necessarily would like to, but if we have to, not all libraries are the same. They may not have the capability to leave them between double doors and things of that nature, but preferred if there could be where our staff is not interacting directly with the staff from the library would be ideal, but I understand sometimes it's not feasible.
Okay. We also have a few questions about containers and bins and stuff. Like one is, are we still using bags or just bins and boxes? Another asks if items will be accepted in containers other than blue bins, such as boxes. So could you say just a word about the containers?
Yeah. One of the things that we did in anticipation of this is we actually ordered 1,000 additional containers because of the unknown, the unexpected. We weren't sure what we were going to run into. So we do have those at our disposal to actually distribute to the libraries. We are going to have those in our vehicles. And if you place a ticket within the help desk, we'll try our best to get containers out to you ASAP. But if we will accept boxes, if that's what you've got, instead of repackage them and things like that, we will accept the boxes to bring them back to our warehouse.
Okay, and then finally, again, we're not going to get to all of these, but there are several questions about the quarantine. When does it start? Do we tag the items and then quarantine them for 7 days, or do we quarantine them for 7 days and then tag them and put in bins? That's just one. There are several questions about the quarantine.
Well, I would say as far as the quarantining the items, and I see Monica, you're about to jump in and say something. So I'll allow you to go ahead. Go ahead, Monica.
All I was going to note is that we are asking libraries to quarantine the items for 7 days before the drivers will pick them up. So anything that we can do to keep that as contactless as possible for those 7 days before the drivers pick up those items is our request.
So Rebecca Malinowski has a question that I think everybody would be interested in. The safety procedures and training that the drivers will have and will be practiced in the sorting centers.
Well, that's a really good question. One of the things that we've actually done, within our hubs is we've got lots of PPEs, masks, gloves, sanitizer spray, disinfectant spray within the hubs, how our hubs are set up are within the pods, which we can allow for that 6 feet of separation between our members. As far as the containers and things like that, as they come in, we do have disinfectant spray that will actually be able to spray the containers as they are brought into to the hubs. So we will be able to keep our staff separated. They will have our PPEs. We even have separate containers where they can dispose of their PPEs in certain areas within the hub and so forth. So we've got plenty of guidelines in place now to safeguard those individuals.
A recent question about the length of time of the quarantine. it's not linked, it's linked to, there's so many different, studies out there. There's some that say 24 hours, there's some that say 2 weeks, there's some that, and there's different kinds of materials. So we came down on this as a conservative approach. I believe that, and I hope that when the realm study, the IMLS study is completed, which should be, or not completed, but when the first results, the first testing results are released, hopefully, definitely this month, we will be able to shorten the quarantine period, but we just don't know yet. And so we picked that time. Other states and areas and countries have picked different times. We're comfortable with 7 days. We're fewer, but we got to keep everybody safe. As far as academic libraries go, I think, generally speaking, we don't know. I mean, they have to decide with their institution, obviously. So the latest that we do meet pretty regularly with the Carly folks and Heartland and Chicago Public and the State Library. And the last we heard about the academic libraries is that there just is really no news at this point. It certainly won't be before fall for the vast majority of them. And I know that in some states they're thinking it might be later. So that's really a big unknown.
There are a couple questions here about filling interlibrary loans for schools and academics. Should libraries do that, or should they deny those requests? There's also someone that gets delivery for the local school at their building. Should they expect to get those books in the earlier phase? So if you could just address that whole interlibrary loan with schools and academics.
Some of those might be questions that we actually need to address directly with Carly. And I don't know if you have an additional recommendation to make outside of that, Mark, but we need to hear from them, I think, what their perspective is on that.
Yeah, I'm actually working with Carly now because it's a lot more coordination that has to take place with dealing with the academic locations, because majority of those locations have shut down and there's no staff available. And that's primarily the reason why they're not included in the first wave. I know Carly is going to be reaching out to the libraries individually to find out if I can make deliveries on the 18th and the 25th, if that is possible, because staff would be available, then we would definitely make those delivery. So right now, I just provided Carly with a list of the material that we had on hand. We had 933 bags in our warehouses that we actually went through to determine the ownership of those items. So if Carly's going to now start reaching out to those locations to figure out exactly when we can make those deliveries, and if we can start up delivery, when and where and how. So it'll be more coming to that shortly.
Well, John DeYoung says he's confused. I don't blame you, John DeYoung. Is there something particular that you're confused about? Or just, is it all of it that's just sort of kind of overwhelming? Well, let me know if you want to speak up. Do we need to,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
There's questions about labeling items, like do they use a 3-letter code? They put there was another one here about sorting. I don't believe they need to sort, correct?
Yeah, there's no sorting required, but the normal traditional Rails delivery label is always required. There's no sorting required. We've never asked you guys to sort, so that would remain the same. And I also saw a question on the delivery day. Whatever your delivery day was before in the past, starting June the 29th, it will go back to that day. So if you receive service Tuesday, Friday, or something like that, you will receive delivery on Tuesday, Friday. Also, I saw from Deborah from National University of Health Sciences, that location is both. They're under Rails, and they're also under SWAN, and then they're also an academic location. So we actually received both items from that location. So you're actually considered both. You're one of the very unique. I think we have 2 or 3 locations that are established like that, where they are under an academic Carly, and then they're also under a network as well, a consortium as well.
So a patron returns a book and library staff quarantine it for a week before checking it in and labeling it. Do we then quarantine it yet for another week before putting it out for delivery pickup?
I don't think you need to quarantine it another 7 days because I think, the thought is you're quarantining it the first 7 days, and then that should suffice. So I don't think it's a need to quarantining a second time once you touch it a second time, I don't believe.
We're also receiving questions asking about quarantine once libraries receive the items. Rails, again, once you receive the items, your libraries can follow the procedures that your libraries have in place in terms of quarantine for those materials. So the understanding that they have been touched by delivery sorters with PPE on in those spaces that will come back to your libraries in those bins. So once they return to your libraries, you can use your own recommendations that used to do that. But we are asking when you're picking or leaving materials for our drivers to pick up, we're asking for those 7 days. And of course, there was some questions about the timing for that as well. We will adjust those times as those recommendations from Realm become available, but until then, we are using the 7-day frame for our own drivers to have that pickup.
And then a question about if regular delivery resumes on June 29th, does that mean we can start placing holds for our patrons from those other libraries? As far as we're concerned, you can. That is up to you. That is, I don't know if your consortia has opinions about that, but we, if you want something delivered, we'll deliver it and pick it up. So, and what we're finding, just I think in general, is that this is, 2 weeks ago, if we'd had this conversation, it would have been very different. Every day that goes by, people are moving along the path of reopening or, resuming normal service. So more and more libraries are wanting delivery and wanting, to start, doing reciprocal borrowing and interlibrary loan, et cetera. We just need you to tell us and, when you want delivery, and we'll take care of the rest of it.
We also know that many of you have very specific questions to your own areas or your own libraries. I do want to encourage you to utilize that Rails Delivery Help Desk email that Dan Bostrom just posted in the chat. We can really work with you individually to make sure that you have your needs and your questions answered that way as well.
So does delivery on June 29th include academic libraries like Quincy University?
Well, as long as there's access, and like I said, that's where we're coordinating with that with Carly now, because we just want to guarantee that we have access to the locations. And if we do have access to the locations, we can deliver to academics, starting June 29th as well. I'm even receptive to delivering on the 18th and the 25th, as long as we can guarantee that there's staff available and we have access.
And so you need to let us know too, obviously.
Yes.
Via the help desk. So I know there's so many moving pieces here. It's crazy, but we're really trying to be there, where and when you need us, but also to keep everybody safe. We have determined that 7 days is what that we need for our staff. You all need to make your own determination.
Speaking of safety, there's a question here about PPE for both CTL and Rails staff. Have you addressed that, Mark? If you did, I missed it.
Yeah, as far as the PPEs for the rail staff, we've got plenty of supplies on hand. I've also worked with CTL, the vendor, and ensuring, because they also have PPEs, masks, and gloves for their staff as well. So we are set. One of the rule of thumbs that we actually put in place was a 3-month supply, or a minimum of 500 gloves and masks within each one of the hubs, to make sure that we had an adequate supply. and that gives us adequate time to order additional as supplies get low. So we will have plenty of PPEs, hand sanitizer, and things like that, within all of the hubs.
Are sorting staff and delivery staff required to wear masks and gloves?
The requirement definitely is masks. The gloves are optional because then we just encourage better hygiene or consistent hygiene. We're constantly washing your hands and using hand sanitizer. But we've actually ordered the nitrate gloves, and then also we have the traditional work gloves that we have for the staff. So it is their choice on whichever ones they feel comfortable wearing. But it is an option for gloves, but it is definitely required for the mask.
And then we do have still confusion about the academics. We had said in the memo that we were not going to deliver, and I believe you just said that we might deliver. So now there's confusion, yes or no to academics on the 18th or 25th.
Well, that's dependent. Like I said, I just had a conversation today with Carly that we were trying to work something out. When we created the opening plan, we did not have that conversation with Carly. It was still, it was going to be a wait and see. But as things are progressing, I'm hoping that Carly can get in touch with as many of the academics as possible, and we can include them with this first wave. But I'm leaving that in their court to reach out to the members to find out who's available, when and where, for us to start making the deliveries.
I do think the best course of action for our academics that are interested in receiving delivery at this point is to email the Rails delivery hotline to let them know of your interest and availability. And that way, when we are working with Carly on some of these things, we know about your interest and that we can act accordingly.
So if they are serviced by CTL, do they put their items out on the night of the 17th or the 18th?
It's actually going to be, since your delivery actually occurs at night, it would actually be on this night of the 17th, where your work is always available the next business day. So it would be required to put it out on the night of the 17th.
There's also a question about estimated time for delivery. I believe you don't know that, correct?
Yeah, that's really difficult to
It would just like
predict.
even a window to share with the staff.
We can try and provide windows, but that is something very difficult because we really don't know what to expect once we get out on the street. I think we can get some standardization as we continue to, as more and more libraries, as all of our libraries opt in. I think we'll have an opportunity to provide better standards. But right now, it's hard to provide a window when we would actually arrive. We're going to do our best to get there as close to the original time as possible, but I can't guarantee anything at this point.
We understand that's a big issue. So as we get a better sense of who we're going to be delivering to on those days, I think we'll be able to get you some information. We just don't know today. But we get it. We will get back to you about that. I think you can put out as many bins as you can fill, right? I'm assuming you'll take what you can take.
Yeah.
Take what's there.
Yes, the goal in the plan is to take whatever is ready. That is, we want to drop off everything that we've got, and we want to retrieve everything that you've got. Right. So we will make it happen one way or another.
There's a question about what time drivers start and end. Well, I think that gets back to the time estimate question again.
Yeah, the routes most likely will probably go out very similar to the times they were before. Some of our routes started at 4 in the morning, some routes started at 7. So those will probably be very similar times that we would be allowing the routes to depart. They would be very similar to that.
But we can't guarantee that people will receive their items at their usual time.
Yeah.
Right, that's correct. I can't guarantee that yet. There's just too many unknowns on what I'm going to actually be doing on the 18th and the 25th.
And then if they have items to return to academic libraries, can they put them in the bins, like from OCLC or?
Yes, yes.
And I'm assuming that the question about quarantining for 7 days items that you pull from the stacks to fill holds, that is treated the same as a return. I mean, anytime if you touch something, you have to quarantine it, right? That's what we're asking. Correct? Yes.
I think we can safely make that assumption. We can continue to adjust that. If that proves to be an issue for your libraries and you want to let us know, we'll continue to hear your feedback. This is a new process for all of us, but that's our intention heading into this process, yes.
And as I said, hopefully the 7 days will turn out to be not necessary, but at this point, I think it is.
And there's questions about, are you picking up from all libraries on the 18th and the 25th? How do they know what day you're coming?
Yes, the thought is to all libraries that we've serviced in the past would actually be serviced on the 18th and the 25th, yes. Then
So if they don't have items, or if just don't worry about it, you'll still appear, or?
Well, see, the thing is though, we may have items from them, but they may not have items for us. And that's where we're going to go by the location either way, or vice versa. I may not have anything to drop off, but they may have items for us. So we are going to stop by all the locations that are public and specials on both of those days.
Okay, and there are a few questions here about using boxes instead of bins. I think you said that was okay until they got bins.
Yes, yeah, and it's important that they put the request for bins in the delivery help desk so that we can prepare those to send out to the library.
Question, incoming bins need to be quarantined?
Yes.
Because they touch them, it says a few people have said that they touch them.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we put something in the blue bin without touching it and breaking the quarantine? Well, that's, I guess, the point, right?
Go ahead, Mark.
Go ahead, Monica. Go ahead. I was just going to talk about how they handle book drops, but go ahead.
I was just going to note that the difference is truly between the bins and quarantine and materials for quarantine is that the bins can be wiped. And so we do have an understanding that there's a possibility to wipe the bins. So that's why once you take the items out of the bins to release them and we take them back, we're not asking that you quarantine the bins because we have the opportunity to wipe those down in a way that we don't have with the materials.
Well, the flow of questions has stopped for the moment. Oh.
And I'm not sure we've answered all these, but we will go back
Right.
and look at them and make sure that we get the answers out.
Should we expect to receive everything that you have for us in the first delivery, or will it be staggered?
No, everything that's within the warehouses will be delivered on the first day.
There's more questions about touching the items and putting them in the bins.
Yeah, we'll give it a couple more minutes and then we'll have to call it for now. We will obviously get back to you about all these things. We've tried to think of everything. Of course, we haven't thought of everything. That's why we're having this conversation, so we can, take more things into account.
And we really appreciate the questions because it also helps us to clarify exactly what kinds of additional guidance that you all need on this. So thank you for that.
Yeah, right. Yes.
I don't think we've talked about the curbside pickup. Many libraries are doing curbside pickup, which may have required repurposing of lobbies and sidewalk areas in front of our facilities. Do we need to advise rails?
I'm sorry, so could you repeat that question, please?
So many libraries are doing curbside pickup, and they may have repurposed lobbies and sidewalk areas in front of their facilities, where our drivers may usually have gone. do they need to let us know about that?
Sure, that's always helpful. You know, any information that that we have on a particular location is always helpful, and that information can just be added right in the delivery help desk, which is then routed to the appropriate manager, service center manager, for them to notify the driver. So if we don't have access to the traditional, the normal drop-off point, they can just add that information and notify us in the help desk.
Okay, and then here's another one about items from Findmore, Illinois. Can those be sent out at this time? Is it fair to say that they can send anything out at this time and you'll figure it out, or is that too broad?
Yes, no. They can definitely, on the 18th and the 25th, anything that you've got in your possession, we can definitely take.
Even if it's for a school or an academic?
Yes, we'll figure it out, yes.
Okay.
What we're doing as far as the schools is concerned, we're just still warehousing them within the warehouse. Those are just being stored in the warehouse. And the same with the academic locations. And I said, I'm hoping that the conversations that we're having now with Carly will be able to make deliveries to the academic locations sooner than later.
Okay, there's still questions about the quarantine, but I'm not sure what else we can say about those at this point.
Yeah, a flow chart is probably a good idea. So we get that the quarantining, there's a lot of questions about the process for that. We will confer and see how we can, explain that more clearly.
Yes.
Yes, we will be providing lots more information. That's why we wanted to get this all out today so that we have time to go back and look at it. Yeah, flow charts. So I'm gonna call it for now. We will go back. We will answer everything, and we will get back to you about everything. Just give us a little time so that we can, digest all of your questions and make sure that we, answer them in the most consistent manner possible. Yes. Okay. So thank you all for all the questions. We're really looking forward to getting this working again. It sure was a lot easier to shut it down than it is to open it back up again. So, and thank you. It's so, it's just, it's really great, but it's also amazing at how quickly, suddenly even, libraries are starting to opt into this, which is great, but it just makes it that much more, it makes it that much more fluid. So then it's hard to, answer questions about schedules, etc. So, okay. And you're welcome to everybody who said thank you. You're welcome and thank you. Okay. Let us turn for a bit to the Realm project, which is the IMLS study. I did post an update on the director's list yesterday, that there is the literature review about the epidemiology of the virus was posted there, has been posted on the Realm page on WebJunction, as was all of the testing protocols. There's, I was reminded yet again why I'm not a scientist, because it was a very intense and confusing document to read. But essentially they, and the thing about the literature review is that there's a lot of, different studies, and some are peer reviewed and some are not. And that makes a big difference in the scientific community. Essentially, they've tested 5 different types of materials. A DVD, I'm not going to remember all of them. I know I'm not. A DVD, a book cover. I have it written down somewhere. And they've tested on day 1 and then again on day 8, I think. And they're still waiting to, to get more definitive results, but it is moving quickly. Hardcover book, softcover book, page of a book, a DVD case, and a paperback cover. I think that's right. Is that 5? I'm sorry. It's on the director's list. So this is moving along. I do hope that more definitive information will be out. Thank you, Dan. They're testing the DVD disc. They are not testing the DVD cover in this round. Did I say that right? No, it's the opposite. They're testing the cover, but not the actual disc. The disc is in the next round. Apparently they had to do it in groups of 5. So they are moving on to start testing the next round, which will include the DVD disc. They're also looking now at the pieces of the AMH, the automated materials handler. For those of you, this is all on the director's list, or you can go to, if you see in the chat there, K-Manity, it's webjunction.org. And then if you just Google Realm, basically if you Google OCLC Realm Project, REALM, you will find it. These are preliminary results. This is about the testing procedure. This is the literature review. This is not, the actual results of the study, but I'm hoping that that's coming soon. And as I said, they are starting to look at the second group of what they want to test, which is going to include things beyond materials, like surfaces, like the pieces of the automated materials handler. They're not, I think, just as you can imagine, this is not going to be something, at least not in the immediate time frame, where they're going to be, producing information, and that's going to say, then this is the policy that you should all follow. This is going to be information that you can use to support evidence-based decision-making to create your own policies. Just, it has to be that way. They can't account for every eventuality, but we're going to know a lot more about materials and the viability of the virus in 2 weeks, I think, than we do now. Does anybody have specific questions about this?
There's a question about magazines, Deirdre. Did they say anything about magazines?
Yes, magazines and newspapers, as well as newspaper dowels, the things that hold the newspapers, will be in the second group. I'm on the steering committee. We meet weekly on Tuesdays. So if there's, they're very careful about information that can be shared. They're careful about what they share with us. They're careful about what we can share, obviously, because nothing's been finalized. But it is moving along. I do really believe that we will know more before the end of June. And hopefully it will enable us to move our materials along faster.
There's a question here about inside a closed book, like they know they are testing a page of a book, but are they testing the viability of the virus on a page inside of a closed book?
I'm not sure. They're testing a page of a book, but I'm not sure what the actual conditions, a piece of paper. Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Yes, because Carolyn is on the operations committee. Yes.
And there's a question here about getting materials out of the way before testing AMH tables.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. And I think that what they're doing right now is developing, they're trying to get a list. Carolyn, I'm sorry, I apologize. Carolyn Coulter wrote that they are testing the viability of the virus on a page inside of a closed book. Okay, so yes, they are testing materials first, but they are developing a list of what else needs to be tested in terms of surfaces. Does that make sense? Okay. There's just
People
so
are
many.
wondering why they can't see Carolyn. You can only see panelists, so unfortunately we can't see Carolyn.
See, the other piece of this is that this is about museums as well and archives. And of course, for museums, it's really much more about, you know, surfaces inside the building. They don't really obviously share things, share materials in the same way that we do. So that it's important that we, you know, take into account their needs as well. Activity kits with multiple pieces. Yes, the children's services area is a big concern. You know, board books, all of the things, all of the you know, toys, etc., puzzles, you name it, that's in a children's room. And obviously, of course, too, very sensitive to you know, the, you know, keeping kids safe, and you know, parents' desire to keep kids safe. There's quite a discussion about this at the operations committee last week. The need to, you know, to focus on children's services, because there are so many different things that and yes, and you know, that Kate Hall has said, as you can all see, I think that, you know, board books we're discussing before. I mean, I think it is important, and we do remind ourselves this too when we talk about this with the IMLS folks, that, you know, we've never been able to, as you all know, you know, guarantee that our materials are clean, or, you know, virus or bacteria free. You know, it didn't necessarily pop into everyone's mind, right? You know, when, you know, they, you know, patrons didn't think of it. Everybody is super aware of it now. So we obviously need to be really, really sure that that's why we're being conservative with our quarantine, you know, that people feel confident that they can use our materials and come into our buildings safely. So I urge you to, you know, look at the project page. It's been posted in chat again. Sign up to receive project updates. They do send them out pretty regularly. So I think I'll stop there on that and hopefully be able to tell you more next week. So we are going to turn now to some library reopening experiences, which you're going to get to hear from your colleagues, and I'm going to turn this over to Monica.
We are fortunate today to have 2 libraries joining us to share their experiences with curbside or phase 1 services. So please join me in welcoming the first library who's here to share today, which is the Rock Island Public Library, with Director Angela Campbell and Director of Circulation Tori Shoes. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Just a little bit of overview about Rock Island. We are a municipal library that serves about 39,000 people. And then we also have a contracting district that serves about 11,000 people. So overall, we have about a 50,000 person service population. We're in Prairie Cat. We have 2 library buildings. We used to have 3. We just closed 1 last year. But we also added a mobile library, and we hope to replace that library that we closed within the next year or 2. Our district extends about 20 miles to the south of our downtown library. So in between downtown and that 20-mile area, about 10 miles away is our southwest branch. So we do have a fairly large area to cover, and we have very urban areas, suburban areas, and rural. So with 34 staff equaling about 25 full-time equivalents, we have a lot to do, which I know we all know that. And another interesting thing about us is that we are on the border with Iowa. So our downtown library is less than 2 miles away from Davenport's downtown library. And due to the differing attitudes of our respective governors on COVID response, it's been completely different for the Iowa side and the Illinois side. And since we share media, that message has been hard to, let people know what we're both doing. So it does cause some confusion. When we suddenly shut down, I think it was about March 17th, there were 6,000 items, I think, checked out. And so that was on our minds. How are we going to get those back? And then how can we serve people? So curbside became our plan right away. And so we did have a while to plan for it. And we began offering that on May 26th. And Tori's with me, and she knows all about the ins and outs because she is our director of circulation. So I am going to turn it over to her, and then we'll answer any questions you might have afterward.
Good afternoon. So yeah, as Angela said, we started Curbside on May 26th. So it's been just a little over a week here. And our general process, basically, a patron can call us to place a hold, or they can still do it via the patron catalog. So, and then once that item is trapped, we do call the patron to schedule an appointment. And then while we're scheduling the appointment time, we also are currently checking out the item. And since our due dates are kind of set out, they're a little bit longer than normal. With that part might change, but so that's kind of our current practice. And then staff fill out an Excel sheet that we have on a shared network. And basically it has the pickup time, the patron name, a description of their car, and then the number of items. And it also has an additional notes field in case, they don't have a cell phone, so they can't call us when they get here. We've also used it for summer reading to kind of get like, oh, they have a summer reading kit to pick up. So that's been helpful. And basically what happens is the patron pulls up to our assigned area and they call a number, which is our main line, and then staff run their items out to them. So I guess kind of in general, some of the challenges and things that we've learned over the last week. I'll touch on some of those. So in general, logistics for staff and patrons have had quite the learning curve. So the ILS, we use a Sierra. I realize not everyone uses that, but manipulating a consortia catalog to work as a standalone system has probably been our #1 challenge. So some examples of that: the pick list wasn't quite trapping holds. We opened it up so that any Illinois library in the area could place holds, and some of those kind of got stuck, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. And so we kind of had to do some manual workarounds with that. And then just, it's very time consuming calling the patrons. Our notices are currently shut off, so we do call them to schedule the appointment. And then the sheer volume of holds in the beginning was quite large. It's since leveled off, so there was a lot of manpower those first couple of days. And then finally, probably our next biggest challenge is the physical building itself. So we are divided into 2 levels. So the door that staff would be using to run out to patrons is on our ground floor, and then the floor above is where that main phone line is. So patrons would call that main phone line, and staff would have to call down to an additional staff person to run the items out. So just a lot of logistics. And then challenges for patrons, I would say having a centralized return. So we are not obviously accepting items in person. They have to put them in the book drop. So kind of just communicating that and retraining them in general just about, how to use curbside service. And then one additional thing that we really try to drive home with them is that we are quarantining items. So once they do return them, they're going to stay on their account for, our 7-day period. But other than that, on the patron side, things seem to be running very smoothly. And, they're really grateful and happy that we're offering a curbside service. And, staff are really happy to see them too. So that's great. I think it's a great way to ease back into serving the community physically, and probably one that will definitely continue into the future. So kind of my tips, I guess, to share with anyone that's going to be starting curbside is just to allow yourself adequate time to formulate a good plan and train staff. So staff input was really important throughout the whole process. We brainstormed different scenarios and tried to predict kind of what kind of snags would potentially occur. And my other advice is just to be flexible, because we all know weird things happen and we can't predict everything. So flexibility has been key. One example that we have is originally we had a 5-item checkout limit. We aren't really holding patrons to that as strictly anymore, because some patrons already had like 40 holds pending and they were, you know, all hitting the pick list, and it was just too hard to keep track of. So and then if you do use the appointment system, I would leave time to stage the items at the end of the day so that they're ready for the next day. But overall, you know, it's been a great service and we're really looking forward to continuing it in the future. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't.
We have a couple here. How many staff run your curbside?
So currently we have 2 staff on the main phone line. It has since died off a little bit. We have 2 circ staff, and then it rolls over to a reference staff if no one's there, but usually it hasn't been a problem. And then we have 1 person on the lower level kind of running the holds in and out.
Do you limit the amount of holds patrons can place?
We did not. So we had tossed around that idea, but since so many of them already had so many existing holds, we kind of felt like it was kind of a moot point.
Okay, and then there's a question about how many appointments per hour you schedule?
Sure. So we scheduled 3 appointments per half-hour slot. It was more than manageable. And I should say we had 3-hour shifts, so 10 to 1, and then 3 to 6 were kind of our slots.
And then have you found that every single person is showing up as opposed to normal holds, which is about 25% no-show?
I would say really we only have a couple people not show up every day. So I think it's been significantly higher.
I think we need to move on. If, again, any questions that we don't get to, we will address.
Yes, thank you very much, Angela, and your team there. Thank you, Tori. But we do have to move on because we got so many voices to be heard. Sorry about that, but thank you so much for sharing.
Thank
And
you.
I know if people reach out to you, you know, directly, you will be happy to share. So go ahead, Monica.
Thank you. We really do appreciate you sharing that. We do have another library also here to share their experience. And so I'm pleased to introduce Gayle Borden Public Library District. Please welcome Chief Executive Officer Carol Metal and Director of Customer Experience Laura Clark to share their experience.
I will unmute myself here. Hello, everyone. Good to be here this afternoon. I'm just going to give a little overview about our library district. We are right now the largest library district in the state. We serve over 145,000 customers in an area that covers about 65 square miles. We serve them with a main library and 2 branches. We started our drive-up service. We're very fortunate that one of our branches in our main library has a perfect setup drive-up system. And it's very much like a bank with the full glass, the microphone, the stainless drawer setup. So we felt comfortable starting this service a month ago. We started it May 4th. And then this past Monday, we started curbside service at our branch in South Elgin. And also this week, we did expand our hours. We are now open, I put that in quotes, for drive-up service and phone service for our full regular hours, full complement of hours. I would also add that, just wanted to add this, that we found this very interesting. On May 20th, we started a home delivery service, going beyond, no restrictions, going beyond the normal requirements that would allow someone to have that service. It could be for anyone. But what we're finding out is, besides people wanting books, they have great social needs. And many of these people do not have computers. So we're providing flyers with that kind of information, with phone numbers, when we deliver the materials to them. So that was very beneficial to them. Just want to give you some stats, and then I'm going to turn it over to Laura. In this month, we have serviced over 4,300 cars, circulating with about almost 13,000 checkouts. And Monday on June 1st was the highest number of cars they saw down there at our main library, with 255 cars. So it hit the pavement running, so much so we had planned for an alternate way to come to the drive-up window. We did not need to put that into effect until this week, because this week now the cars were backing out into the side street. And so now we have a much safer way for people to approach the drive-up window. And we've seen as many, I don't know, Laura could probably, but we've seen as many as 13, 15 cars in line, waiting to be serviced. So it's been very, very popular, and people are very, very, very grateful for it, very grateful. So now I'm going to turn it over to Laura, and she can, just like Tori did, explain a little bit more of the ins and outs of that service.
Hi, everybody. So some of the things that we learned when we opened this up, I think one of the biggest things was, if we had known what we know now about COVID back when we first closed, we probably would have kept the drive up open longer, because it is contactless for our staff members. So we feel that we are fairly protected behind the glass and the microphone and everything else. We do not touch any of the patrons' materials or their library cards or anything. We don't accept money. It is purely a pickup point. So we're handing them materials that we've already had in quarantine. So there's no fear on our end that we're going to catch something. It's been working really well. Staff was extremely happy to get back to work. They missed that patron contact. And we did have some patrons who are a little upset that we're not offering everything through the drive up, but our box is only so big. So we can only put mainly books and DVDs into the drive-up box to send them out to them. In order to keep from touching any of the patrons' library cards or anything, we have them either hold them up to the window so that we can read the library card number off the back of them, or we simply ask them what their last name is. They've been extremely cooperative with us in all of this, and most of them have gotten used to it now, and they just drive up and hold the card up for us. So it's been working very well. Some advice I have is to remain flexible. When we started this, we weren't sure what we were getting into. It was very hectic the first few days down there, because all the holds that we had been holding had been moved into the drive-up area. So we were overwhelmed with carts of books, and we had to bring in extra bookshelves and everything else to hold it all. We finally have gotten it down to a manageable level, but they just keep coming through the library and picking up material one day after another. We see sometimes the same people day after day coming to retrieve new materials. It's been a very eye-opening experience. Hopefully we can start adding more materials to what we can give them. But time will tell on that. So all I can say is remain flexible, have a plan in place, and just keep informing patrons and staff what the rules are and what you're offering and what you expect from them, because you can't tell them enough.
All right, that's great. Thank you so much, Carol and Laura. Just one quick question, and then we have to move on. Are you serving everybody or just local, Gayle Borden card holders?
Just Gayle Borden card holders. When we started, we now are allowing our RVs to put holds on and pick them up at the drive-up.
Great. Thank you. Go ahead, Monica.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for your insight. And I know there were a lot of great questions in the chat. And I'm sure, again, as Dee mentioned earlier, that if you would like to reach out to some of these libraries for more of their experience, that they'd be more than happy to help answer your questions. So thank you. Now we will move on to the Illinois State Library and their plan to reopen. Please welcome Joe Natale, Chief Deputy Director from the Illinois State Library.
Hi, I hope you can hear me. We reopened on Monday. We really been planning on reopening since the day we closed, because we thought we would reopen. We closed May 17th. We thought we were going to reopen April 1st, but it kept getting moved back a month, back a month. But we've been ready. Twice a week, Greg and I, we were basically the only ones here most of the time. The Secretary of State's Chief of Staff had a meeting twice a week with the directors and deputy directors, planning the reopening and ordering PPE and how we're going to handle the public. And we're continuing that meeting for the next month to see how it goes. But we opened the 4th, and we were excited to be back. But then at 2 o'clock, we were all sent home because there was a protest rally across the street, but it was organized by 3 high school girls who really did a good job. So it's like the first day of school. But anyway, the staff are required. We all come in through the Monroe Street door. And if you come here, you'll go through the Monroe Street door. We take the temperature of the staff every day. If their temperature is 101.4, they're sent home. We do not take the temperature of the public, but we do require the public to wear a mask unless there's a medical reason that they can't. So that's in place. When people came in that first day, Monday, they were given 5 masks. They were given hand sanitizers, and we gave them a bag because it was recommended that when you're not using your mask, you can keep it in a bag. If you're in a private office, you do not have to wear a mask. Unless somebody comes in, then you should mask up. But if you're out in the building, you should mask up. We'll be happy to share with you. It was a little more extensive list than we wanted, but we do have some guidelines on reopening just to give staff an idea of how to move in the building, how to interact with each other. We're saying no social functions, we're not having any meetings here, and we are discouraging staff to have a birthday party or anything. It's kind of a bummer, but until further notice, we're trying to maintain that social distance. One of the big issues that we knew closing, the day before we closed, that the big issue for us was going to be the talking book and Braille service. Those people are dependent on those books, and that phone just did not stop ringing. But we couldn't have staff in here. We didn't want them to interact. But we had when we reached about, let's say 40,000 items that came in, we called the staff in, some of the talking book staff, to get those shelved and start, so that work is done before they came back. And then the last week before we reopened, they came in and they shipped out about 14,000 books. So we got that program going again. And I think I want to, just a couple other things. We did do some emergency rulemaking during this period. We waived the certification for this year. Libraries aren't around to fool around with that. We extended the deadline for the public library construction grant from April 15th to, yes, people can sign up for Talking Book, April 15th to June 15th. And on that reciprocal borrowing curbside service, we wrote an emergency rule that we're suspending the reciprocal borrowing requirements for 45 days after the end of a gubernatorial disaster declaration. So the last one was May 29th. So that waiver lasts until August 12th, unless he issues another one, and then it pushes 45 days until an emergency rule is good for 150 days. So when we hit the end of that, if this keeps going, or if there's a second wave, we'll have to revisit this issue. But I think those are the main points that I wanted to get across. But the staff is glad to be back, and the Secretary of State's office, some of the governor's people are looking, because we've reopened, and the entire office, driver services, vehicles, and they're looking, how did we do that? There is, if you're waiting to get your license, you're maybe in a line for 2 hours, but they're encouraging people to do it online. So there you go.
So there is a question about, for the talking books, how patrons know what materials you have if they do not have a computer.
Well, I think what they do, I'm vaguely, I've been on the fringe of this service. When they sign up, they give a profile of what kind of books they enjoy. I know this, but Amish mysteries is a category. So if they mark that, the system automatically generates those types of books and doesn't replicate a book they've gotten before. So there is a way around that. We do get a lot of letters, though. I handled the mail. My wife said I'm working my way up the organization, but I handled the mail, and there were a lot. That was most of the mail that came. Newspapers and requests for talking books.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
Thank you, Monica. I think that I'm going to skip over my part about the a part about the advice about a policy about staff returning from out of work vacations. I think I'm going to put this on the director's list, or just answer questions later if people have them, because I want to be sure that we can get in our discussion of Aurora and non-resident card legislation, and also we have Miguel waiting out there. Joe, do you want to give us an intro or just a brief explanation of the Cards for Kids bill that is, and before we have Michaela talk about what they've done at Aurora?
Right. I'm sorry, I don't have the bill number, but we have to submit by July 1st a regulatory agenda that we're going to do a rulemaking. So this would be Title 23, Part 3050, the non-resident, public library non-resident services, and we'll add a new section to implement non-resident library card privileges for students in unincorporated areas in Illinois whose household falls at or below the U.S. Department of Agriculture's income eligibility guidelines. So I envision that that'll be submitted and published sometime in July. We need to get on it and get the rules drafted and submitted to the code division. And I used to run the code division, so I know about rulemaking. So those proposed rules can be published. After they're published for 45 days, that's when we have the comment period, where I hope we do get some input before we file the rules. But then after we file the rules, we get comments that come in. We also get comments from the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. If you comment on these rules, the letter goes to me and the response comes from me. But I work with the staff to draft a response. We have to submit, when we go to second notice after 45 days, we send any corrections or changes to the Joint Committee. We also send those letters. Since those are considered ex parte communication, we also submit those to our ethics officer. You can also comment, you can call me and say something about the rules. If it's substantive, I have to document it and include that. But if it's a question like, when do you think JCAR is going to look at these rules, or what page was it published on? That's a technical question. We don't document that. Hopefully we can get this on the agenda. I'm really aiming for the November meeting. That's the veto session. They're here in Springfield, and we can get those adopted early in December, before the end of the year. If it goes beyond that, it go to the December meeting. We get it in, maybe adopted by around the first week of January. If we're lucky, we can get it done in October, but that's kind of pushing it. So that's how the process works.
So Joe, what's the difference between unincorporated and unserved, or is there one?
Untaxed.
So
But
untaxed.
they're not taxed.
Right, so that,
For library service.
right, so that's either or both, or,
Well, we'll probably have to add a definition
right,
to clarify that.
right.
And not to throw another monkey wrench in, but Greg found something in the Department of Revenue where disabled veterans get a break on their property tax.
Right.
So we need to include that in this rulemaking also.
Okay,
So.
all right. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, and I only envision one other rulemaking. So this one's I like to put them both together and submit at the same time, but this is really a priority and we want to get this done first.
Yes, and I think I'm imagining that the rulemaking will include some, how it's going to be determined that a person qualifies, correct?
Well, on that Department of Agriculture, it's a little murky I haven't figured out,
Right.
but the income eligibility guidelines.
Right,
I hope we can just say that, and JCAR doesn't say that every year we have to amend that rule to make it for the current year. That's how I'm going to try to submit it. It's like every time ILA updates their public library standards, we have to amend the rules.
right, that's true. I hadn't even thought of that.
So that's my problem, though. We'll get it done for you.
All right, well, thank you, Joe.
Okay.
Thanks for stepping in. As a matter of fact, Greg is at a meeting with the governor's office about this very topic, we suspect.
Yeah.
Possibly, so there will probably
He's in the note. He said, get him if I need him.
Okay.
So, but trying to
We
handle
don't
this
need him.
myself.
So I think we'll turn to Michaela to talk about what they've done at Aurora related to this, and then see what time we have for questions. You there, Michaela?
Yes, I'm here.
Great.
All right. So first, I'll just tell you a little bit about the Aurora Public Library. So we are a city library, and we're in the process of transitioning to a district library. So that's pretty exciting. But as a city library, our boundaries are the same as the city's boundaries. There are these little pockets of unincorporated areas all over the city. And as a shorthand, we call those the township, because almost all of those areas are part of the Aurora Township. And so it's just artifacts of the way the city developed and grew over time, but they're really all over the place. It's a street here, a street there, a little pocket here. It's all over the place. So just as I said, because they're outside of the city limits, they're also outside of our boundaries. So this is the community of about 200,000 in the far western suburbs. It's very diverse. About 40% of our residents are Spanish speaking. We have a wide variety, a wide spectrum of income and educational attainment, but it just so happens that people that live in those township areas tend to be on the lower level of those income and educational levels. So a big part of our mission is to make sure that kids, parents, and teachers have what they need to do well in school. And our city also is really focused on this, on economic development, educational attainment. And so even though these people aren't in the city is still very concerned. And there's a lot of support and concern for people in the township. And the city does a lot, and the library traditionally has done a lot. So our bookmobile is the primary library for a lot of the kids in the township. They attend Aurora schools. And so we have a really strong school outreach program. We have what we call enrichment collections, that basically deposit collections that live at a lot of those schools. We participate in the non-resident borrower program. We allow installment payments for non-resident cards. And our foundation actually provides a subsidy for cards whose families use public assistance who live in the township. So we kind of already had that in place. So when everything shut down in mid-March, we got to work right away, just like everybody did, to provide the most library service we could under the circumstances. And one of the first things we did was extend expiration dates for all library cards, including these cards. We call them subscription cards, these cards that people pay for from the township. We ramped up online library card applications, which we'd been doing for a while, and we sort of quietly didn't worry too much about it if people that applied were in the township, and so not technically within our boundaries. So Joe, you might want to just like don't listen at this point. So when we heard that the Cards for Kids Act was coming down the pike, we saw an opportunity, and we thought we should ask the board to waive fees for all of the township residents until the end of the school year 2021 as a temporary measure. But we thought it was something that we could do where we probably wouldn't have to worry about the state library police coming after us, at least not for a while, because they were still closed at that time. So the board had a really great conversation at their May meeting about this. I think, you know, all of the members were concerned about providing access to people who needed it. They were also really concerned about being fair to taxpayers who pay for library service. And so in the end, they split the difference and decided to waive fees for all of the township students until June 30th, 2021, regardless of income level. And so they understood that this was more than the law is going to require, and in fact, more than the law allows. But they were comfortable with that. They're pretty comfortable with that level of risk. And of course, the library staff are really happy about it too. So this week we're working out the logistics. You know, we'll need a new patron type. We have to write up some procedures, you know, and all those things. And we're going to start promoting it through social media and with the township government itself next week. We have a program where we're handing out census materials through our local food banks, and we'll start doing that as well with these free cards. So as we slowly reopen our facilities, we're really excited to be able to welcome more of our community too, while that's happening. So that's the long and the short of it. Any questions or thoughts out there?
I don't see anything at the moment, but
They're
thank you.
exhausted.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Michaela. That's we will look forward to updates from, you know, in terms of how it goes, and I'm sure others will be following your lead, and then also hearing, you know, in terms of the rulemaking. It'll be very interesting, I think, how this rolls out.
For sure.
So just quickly, how it impacts libraries who have intergovernmental agreements. You know, that covers more than the students that are referred to in this act. But I take your point, Alyssa. Antonia, I don't think this affects Harvey, because this is about unincorporated or unserved people. So, okay. Miguel, yes, you're still with us, I believe. So Miguel is the director of the Center for the Future of Libraries at ALA. And I thought, you know, there's been a lot of conversation about, you know, what's going to happen, how are public libraries, what are they going to be like if, you know, after the the pandemic? I mean, are people going to browse? Are people going to come in? Or, how are, what services are we going to provide? So I turn, as I always do when the future comes up, to Miguel. Maybe he can offer us some ideas and some encouragement. I'm sure you can.
Okay.
Take it away.
Thank you very much. And if the host can enable screen sharing, I can put up the slides. If not, we're fine as well. But also just following on Dee's remarks at the start of this meeting, I think most of us know that the memorial service for George Floyd is happening right now. And so I want to just take a moment just to recognize the grief and hurt that that family is experiencing, and the grief and hurt that it's being experienced by all of our communities. So thank you just for that. Let me go ahead and
Thank you, Miguel.
open this. And okay. So thanks so much to Dee and the staff at Rails for letting me join you today. I've been here from the start of this meeting, and I really can't say how impressed I am, how overwhelmingly impressed I am with the work that Dee and Monica and Mark and so many others at Rails are doing. So I wanted to take some time today just to talk about some of the areas of information need that are really emerging during this pandemic, especially those areas in which libraries may already have a vested interest and experience. I know that most of our profession's efforts have really been focused on the complicated process of reopening and keeping staff and community safe. But I think we're also all starting to look ahead to how we can continue to offer valuable and innovative public services in an environment that's really rapidly changing. So a couple of the things that I keep thinking about as I kind of scan around and look at different pieces of information, I think it's going to be really important for most of our institutions and organizations to go back to work with full knowledge that the pandemic is a health crisis and that many of us are making accommodations for public health concerns in our spaces, but that during all of this, there's also been significant changes in the ways that healthcare is provided in this country. One of the big areas that's starting to change is telehealth, the provision of healthcare or health information over devices at a distance. Very early in this pandemic, the Department of Health and Human Services started to provide new guidance for covered healthcare providers, subject to HIPAA rules, health information privacy rules, that allowed them to seek to communicate with patients and provide telehealth services through remote communications. We've also started to see the FCC. They announced plans for a $200 million COVID-19 telehealth program that's funded by Congress as part of the CARES Act to help healthcare providers offer connected care services to patients at their homes or at mobile locations. I think for libraries, that likely means that some of the most immediate information needs may start to see an increased demand for not just health information, I don't think, but things like equipment, internet access, and especially because of the private nature of this information, private space or some sort of other location so that people can access those telehealth services. I think many of us talked about how different people have different social needs. During Carol's presentation, she talked about how their library is doing a great job of thinking through some of those things. So this may be one of those sort of changes that in the midst of planning for reopening, we also need to consider how this may also factor in. I think being ready to put health information front and center might be a really proactive step that we're already thinking about, but we may also need to think about health technology support as well as just the information. The other thing that's starting to happen in healthcare, and again, most of us are focused on this issue of the virus and contagion, but one of the real big effects of the pandemic, of the stay-at-home orders, and especially of sustained social distancing, is likely increased fear and anxiety. Just recently, the US National Center for Health Statistics and the Census Bureau released results from an April 2020 household pulse survey, a special survey of Americans, and their findings suggested that as many as a third of Americans were showing signs of clinical anxiety or depression based on their responses to questions that are normally used to screen patients for mental health conditions. We've seen throughout these past several weeks, when many of us have been at stay-at-home orders, that meditation apps like Headspace and Zenbello and teletherapy platforms like Talkspace have all started to experience increased use and interest throughout this period. And we've continued to see the development in access to mental health resources over the past several weeks. Google actually recently announced a partnership with the National Alliance on Mental Illness to provide access to more mental health resources, including a clinically validated anxiety self-assessment when users in the US search for information about anxiety. I know that many of our libraries had already begun making inroads around wellness and movement-based programming. I think we may now need to focus on mental health and emotional wellness efforts if we weren't already there before. And those might be somewhat challenging, especially given continued guidelines for some social distancing. So we may want to think about promotion of materials that address these issues, the promotion of bibliotherapy, to use something of an outdated term, or other reading as sort of wellness initiatives, or even the development of virtual programming that gives people time and space to breathe, be calm, other types of things. We might want to think about, in the same way that we had, dial-in story times, could there be a sort of dial-in meditation or dial-in guided relaxation process, or even partnering with members of the community who might have insight in guiding these types of activities, be they social workers or therapists, other people, asking if they might be interested in doing YouTube recordings or podcasts or other types of things to have that sort of content readily available. I won't deny that there are days when I tune in to Chicago Public Library's story time on YouTube or Facebook, because it is just that sort of calming moment that helps all of us cope with many of these situations that we're in. The next most immediate thing I think that most of us are probably thinking about is economic development, both in terms of how it will affect our own budgets, but of course how we serve our communities. For those members of the community who are fortunate to retain their job, I think public services will probably need to adapt to support more remote work efforts. That could mean an increase in chat or virtual reference. It could mean more people requesting curbside delivery of business materials or professional materials that they're using in their regular work environments. It might also result in increased promotion of things like databases or other things that are related to professional services and professional work. I've had to point more than a few people to ALA's library databases that have Harvard Business Review and Wall Street Journal and other things because they didn't know that those were available. But as they're working remotely, that's become more popular. The more urgent issue, I think, is likely going to be the needs of job seekers. Stay-at-home orders and social distancing have really had the most detrimental effect on smaller local retailers and restaurants. And this has really meant a lot more consolidation of the job market, where individuals are now seeking a limited number of jobs, or they're turning to gig platforms where they can pick up work, whether that's Uber or delivery services or something else. And then there's also going to be a large category of people who are reskilling and shifting to new sectors. I think most all of those options will require some amount of information and technology literacy to support applications, processes, and new onboarding techniques. I think it's really important in this moment, as we think about the capacity that we have to provide those services, that many of us become aware that there are several companies that are starting to step up with their efforts to make continuing education and workforce development content available for free, especially to individuals who are experiencing unemployment right now. Some of us may be aware of Google's Grow with Google initiative, where they've partnered with community organizations like libraries to provide different tools around digital literacy and career advancement and growth. Google recently announced that that initiative would be put online for more institutions to take advantage of and to make available to more people. So it's worth taking a look at what Grow with Google could do to help enhance our collection of resources for members of our community. One of the other ones that's really interesting is that Illinois is one of the first states to partner with online education company Coursera for their workforce recovery initiative. And under that initiative, qualifying individuals can visit Illinois' Get Hired webpage and access free Coursera courses using their Illinois WorkNet account. So basically, when Illinois residents apply for unemployment assistance, they should be directed to the Get Hired page, and there's a great resource there on professional development resources. The great thing with the Coursera suite is that they have access to many of those online courses, including many of the certificate-bearing courses that would normally come with a fee. They have until September 30th to register for that program and until the end of this year to complete their participation in those Coursera courses. From a library perspective, I think that may also mean there's opportunities for thinking about how we support community members' participation in those types of online courses. Most of us know that online learning can be a very difficult task, especially if you're taking it on alone. But certainly if libraries or other community-based organizations find ways to create community, even if it's online, to create some amount of structure around those online courses, that in many ways is as important as access to the content itself. We're also starting to see that this pandemic has launched a new wave of misinformation and disinformation campaigns. So much so that the World Health Information alerted governments to the companion infodemic that has been created by COVID-19. Misinformation is likely only going to increase as scientists, governments, and pharmaceutical companies pursue a vaccine or other treatments. So even though we've seen a wealth of it already, it will likely only continue the further we get. And it's going to hit a very nice intersection with our upcoming November elections as well. So we should be prepared for an overwhelming campaign of misinformation. This is, of course, not new territory for libraries. I think we're going to have to exercise some caution around our collections, even collection development policies, because even as early as January, there were already hundreds of titles related to coronavirus and COVID-19 available online, be they from self-publishers or on Amazon or something else. So trying to think as we increase our collections that address this issue, are we picking the best pieces of information? And are we handling patron requests or patron interest in certain titles with care and attention to the quality of information that's provided in those materials? We continue to see the spread of false information across social media, and even the best efforts of Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and WhatsApp to label or limit the sharing of false information, most of those have fallen short. So it really falls back to an education and information campaign to help communities seek reputable and verifiable information and share information responsibly. So I think that that's something that libraries are very comfortable with, but it might again be something to introduce into our social media campaigns, online programming, newsletters, or other types of things, that sort of expert guidance that we all bring to this conversation about misinformation. And this whole issue is made even all the more difficult as many newspapers still struggle during the downturned economy with limited advertising revenue leading to difficult decisions around both national and local news coverage. So even as some news outlets have lowered their paywalls for portions of the coronavirus coverage, it's really unclear how long publishers will stay committed to this model or how long they'll be able to do that. I've seen a real increase in questions, emails, and phone calls into me asking about library journalism partnerships. Are there models out there by which libraries can contribute to or even help lead community-based nonprofit journalism in their communities? This might be something especially for teen and youth librarians to start to think about. There's a lot of great models out there of communities that have recruited teen or young adult journalists to flex their writing skills, their critical thinking skills, and contribute to great coverage of what's happening in their local community. So libraries may also want to start thinking about how they can shore up news coverage and news promotion, and maybe even how they might want to get further into the lead on different types of things about the sharing of information in their communities. And many of those things can be done at a distance, but it's a great public benefit information creation that we provide to our communities. I've only talked about just a few things today, and I've tried to limit myself to thinking about information services and needs from the community. But I know that there are a lot of other issues at play, issues about space reconfiguration, meeting policies, materials access and delivery, and so much more. Things that I know that we heard about already in this meeting and have seen from what's happening at Angela and Tori's library and Carol and Laura's library, the great thinking that Mark and the Rails team are doing around materials delivery and access. But I also think that it's really important, in the same way that we looked at how information needs might start to change, realizing that there's lots of signals for how these issues are moving in different ways across sectors and industries, and how we might be able to borrow from or repurpose some of the ways that different organizations, businesses, retail, restaurants, government are starting to implement some changes. The last thing I'll just say is that one of the real challenges that we have for thinking about the future right now is that the pressures and urgencies of the moment defy how we normally think about the future. I think usually we think about the future in expansive terms. We have an enthusiasm for thinking about all the things that we could do, all the interesting directions that we could take. And one of the really weird and difficult things about right now is that we're compelled to lean into one of the other elements of thinking about the future, which is a process called scoping. Scoping defines what the exercise will look like, what is in and what is out. And so accordingly, depending on the scope, some things will be excluded from the view while others will be taken up. So I think with all of our teams, it's going to be really important to talk about the most important and necessary functions and purposes of the library in this moment, and use that as the place to start thinking about what new services and programs you will bring. We can't restart everything we were doing before. I think it's going to be really important for our organizations to take a look and say, well, what was the most important thing that we did? Whether it was movement of collections and materials, the provision of reference services, the provision of services for people who do not have internet access or technology, and start to find those as your primary areas for innovation and change, and also use those as the indicators of where you should be looking for inspiration for those changes and trends. I really want to thank Dee and Rails for being so supportive of this work and for letting me join you all for this limited amount of time. There's more information at our website, ala.org/tools/future trends. The other great piece of information that we're trying to develop is this coronavirus pandemic page that really starts to break down how different indicators we've encountered during this pandemic have implications for what libraries normally do. The library is space, the library is workplace, the library in health and wellness, those types of things. And please share your thoughts. My email address is there. I'm more than happy to take a phone call or an email if you or your library staff would like to talk through some of the issues that you're confronting, or if I can be helpful in pointing towards other resources or indicators of how libraries can deal with different issues. So I'm hoping that I've left enough time that if there are any questions, we can share that. I'll leave this slide up in case Mary wants to share any of the questions that might have been chatted in.
Thank you, Miguel. I so appreciate everything you had to say, but I think especially the part about how we have to change the way we look at the future. I mean, I've always loved making plans, whether they're, strategic plans or travel plans. And now it's so much harder to do that because the present is so uncertain that you can't say, okay, I can assume this and then move on from there. So yes, thank you so much. And as always, I highly recommend the Center for the Future of Libraries website. Does anybody have any questions for Miguel? Or is everybody exhausted?
Well, there's interest in getting a copy of the webinar, which I'm assuming we can provide.
Yep. You mean the one that he did a couple weeks ago? I assume?
No, the one the one that he just did right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Joe already gave a link to the one that Miguel did a little bit ago, so people are interested in the slides from today.
And I can make the slides available, and of course the recording will be available as part of this. So yes.
That's right. Yeah, the member update is recorded. That's exactly right.
Thank you, Miguel.
Thank you.
Any questions from anybody about anything else? I know it's been a long couple of hours. We've gotten a whole bunch, we've covered a lot, and as I said before, we will get back to you about everything somehow. Anything else? Anything that you would like us to bring to you in the future that's not just related to, you know, how to deal with the day-to-day? Is there anything that that we can do for you related to thinking about the future or anything like that? You know, please let us know, because that's our job too. Okay, so you know, please sign up for the Realm project, REALM. If you the link is in the chat. Just Google OCLC Realm. Please go to the Delivery Rails delivery page to be sure that you fill out the information that we need to know if you're interested in delivery. And all the questions you have, we will get back to you with answers. Thank you, Nicole. There's the link again. Thank you for all the thank yous, and thank you all. And I think that we will sign off at 2:58 p.m. Bye, everyone.